welcome to a very special episode of Marketing and the Madness, because we're at the Retail Tech Show and I am interviewing, well, I would like to say one of my good friends, someone who has just headlined and kicked off one of the stages here at the show. I'm going to get your name and job title wrong now, Fabrice Khullar. Job title, over to you. I got it right first time I did this.
Director of Product Experience.
Yeah, Director of Product Experience at Boots. But also, I mean, Fabrice just has the most amazing backlog in career. You've been at Selfridges, Sainsbury's. I'm going to try Browns Fashion? No.
Matches.
Sorry, there we go. Matches fashion. Should have got that bit right. But Sky, well. Really knows this stuff. So if you guys are interested in product and UX and the future of what that looks like, this podcast is going to be absolutely brilliant for you. Tell me a little bit about your role, because there's lots happening at Boots at the moment. You've been involved with some fairly large transformation there over the past few months. Tell me a bit about your role at Boots, and then let's dig into what you were discussing on stage.
Yeah, sure. Look, I've been at Boots sort of 18 months plus maybe now. Came in to help them with a large digital transformation program. As part of that, the remit for me was to rebuild and, kind of manage and lead the tech, the product UX and some of the tech function, but also ultimately kind of get that function to be working in the way that we needed it to work for this transformation program. I think, there was a lot of the way things had worked for a long time. I think they'd fallen into this steady state, which probably some of it was down to the technology not being flexible enough. Some of it was down to mindset, I'd say, and just, not necessarily always getting the best out of the teams, the technology, and ultimately the customer experience. So my role was to come in and help turn some of that around whilst delivering this brand new re-platform. So we're changing everything. And we're about sort of 12 months in now to that. So we've still got a little way to go. But it's been a super interesting journey, just like seeing how much transformation and change needs to happen, not just with the tech, but all around us, really.
Yeah.
And the world's been moving around us as well. And we'll come back to that. But that's kind of what my talk was about.
Cool. Well, let's get straight into it. What were you talking about on stage? I mean, obviously, like you've just referenced, there's been a huge amount of change in the last few years, just culturally as well as the way technology is evolving and changing. I can't go a day without saying AI about 30 times at the moment. Yeah. So we know that there's a lot of change. What does that mean?
Well, and that's the thing, right? The realization as well is being on these large transformation programs. I've been on a few now. You kind of get into this pattern where you follow you do all the right things, which are, you plan ahead, you work out what you want to do, you kind of look at your as-is processes, you map the to-be design and how things need to change, you gather requirements from, all the right stakeholders in the business, and a lot of the time, product is primarily seen as the function that gathers requirements. You then design those things based on, what your SMEs and your sort of operators are telling you, the people that run the business. And I think increasingly what we're seeing is you're then on these long sort of, sprints to deliver this technology, deliver the requirements, deliver the change. And whilst that's happening, the world around you is changing. And suddenly it's like, is that thing that we defined 12 months ago still relevant? Is that still how customers shop? Have we thought enough about these other things that are happening that we now need to build into this system? And then you're like, oh, but wait, our scope is locked because we've got to deliver to a timeline. And you get into this loop that I think increasingly is really difficult to manage. And I think predominantly, and I touched on this out there, I think it's because a lot of the models we operate with are still built on certainty, right? And they're about removing uncertainty. And I just think that that's increasingly unrealistic in a world where things are just uncertain all the time. Like uncertainty is the new norm, right? So I think we need to start to think about how do we actually operate in that environment, and that's really what I'm challenging my peers in retail to start thinking about.
Yeah, it is a massive shift change, though. I mean, I come from, working at digital agencies where we ran these huge, long waterfall projects, which might take up to 2 years to re-platform, rebuild websites, whatever it might be, depending on the product, the app, the, website that we were building. And it just can't work like that anymore because, like you say, everything is, if you build and you work like that, you're out of date, but way before you've even launched. And I think customer expectations, the way that we work, the way that the world now works has changed so dramatically that actually the way that we need to deliver projects has got to change. It's got to change quickly. I feel like someone had a major announcement this week. Someone told me about this yesterday. I can't remember who, but anyway, is it Salesforce have now said that they are headless. Yes. One of my clients told me yesterday. So, everyone, all these huge, big platforms understand that it can't be this one, huge project anymore, that they've got to be able to switch in, switch out, change daily.
I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't invest in your technology foundations. And I think, I've worked with a lot of the big providers and still work with some of them that you may have mentioned. And there are things you've got to do. You've got to evolve your technology. You've got to modernize your stack. But I think even in those more modern versions of it, where you're thinking about headless and API first, and like the thing that we're not necessarily always buying into, which we should be buying into, is it's the flexibility that's important for me. Because even with headless and Mac and, more flexible systems, you're still kind of planning ahead. You still think you have the answers and you build to those answers and you think, oh, the agility will come once we build this thing. The reality is, like, increasingly, we need to be able to pivot. We need to be able to change our minds. You need to know that you're 12 months into this transformation and maybe the stuff you had ignored is suddenly really important. How do you suddenly pivot to do that without completely destroying your program or annoying your exec or your sponsors because you're going to deliver things late? So I think increasingly we need to be thinking about, yes, the technology is super important, but creating the right mindset and creating organizations that are in their mindset flexible enough to pivot, to change, to roll with the punches that are coming all the time. I think that becomes really important in this environment too.
So how do you stay on top of what is changing? I mean, that's hard, right? Because, knowing what your customers really want and what they say they want and what they actually want are sometimes two very different things.
I think we've actually talked about this before. That's always really interesting to me. I think increasingly what I see, and I'm trying to drive in my organization, is a move away from, we often talk about experimentation. I mean, there's a couple of things. Test and learn is a word that I think we often still think is just a marketing thing. Like that's what CRM do with email, and they test on different audiences and different segments. And it's great that they do that. But increasingly in my world, in product and in technology, we should be experimenting and testing and learning as a commercial discipline anyway, because it makes sense to figure out, let's figure out how this thing's going to land with customers before we invest in it or before we completely scale it, right? And I think traditionally we've started to bring some of that in. I mean, I've had a number of places I've worked, I've had A/B testing teams and, teams that can do some experimentation. But a lot of the time, that's usually once you've decided the plan. So we've decided what we're going to build. Let's now go do some testing to figure out, if we build it this way or we build it that way. The decision's already made. You're just fine tuning at that point. I guess what I'm arguing for is, I think experimenting has to become the plan. It has to become how you now build the plan. Because if I look at how quickly the world of AI is moving, 3 months ago, everybody was talking about ACP and OpenAI and ChatGPT and how they were going to get involved in agentic commerce. A few weeks later, it was all about UCP and the Google protocol. And then, OpenAI announced that they're not interested in the commerce bit. They're interested in becoming an ad business, right? I'm paraphrasing badly here, but effectively my point is, what if you'd gone all in and said, we're going to build this to the OpenAI protocol, or we're going to put all our eggs into this thing here, and you get it wrong because that vendor shifts or their roadmap changes or their ethos changes, or, they suddenly are not someone you want to work with. Where's the flexibility in your system to change course? And I think that's what it's about. It's like, let's go and increasingly what I'm trying to do with some of my teams is how do we quickly do discovery rather than say to our teams and our leaders, oh, you're right, this agentic thing's coming, we're going to deliver X. What we're saying is this agentic thing's coming. There's about 25 things we need to figure out. Let us figure out how we very quickly, building a small team, building prototypes, testing it on customers, testing it within the business, with store colleagues, wherever we can, to understand what's the path that we need to build to get to it. I think that's a really different shift in how we're doing things today.
Yeah, go customer first. Like, we have to listen to what our consumers want, and hopefully sometimes there is a bit of trust, because like we've said, what people say they want or what they think they want.
100%.
In reality, when you've designed something and it works even the way they think they want it, they actually do want something different. It's really, really hard. It's a hard blend. I want to actually map into the UCP piece, because I was recently at another show, won't mention it, and I got to interview Google and PayPal and two other partners that are part of the UCP protocol. As someone that's working, for a brand, and actually delivering, what do you think of things like that? And feel free to be open. They may listen, but I'm sure they'll still love you.
We're working with them too, and they're fascinating. Actually, I spent some time with the senior UK team of at Google a few weeks back, and what I found maybe more fascinating than just the UCP part is just that point around. They describe what I thought was a really interesting way to look at the customer journey these days and how people buy products. So I guess previously, and we've all done this in retail, we've talked about that very linear journey of like, you're made aware of something, you're then, you have an intent, and then you purchase, whatever that is. And some organizations, some of the ones I've worked in, or even I've done this, where we build our teams around that. We kind of have, this part of the journey, and that's the part of the journey we're developing. And then we go into the payment side and we develop that side of it. The problem is, like, what Google talked to us about was super interesting, which was that you've increasingly got this thing where people are streaming, scrolling, searching, and then shopping. And they're not necessarily doing those things in order. They could be doing all three at the same time. So, increasingly, you want to buy a product, you'll go, let's say we were talking earlier about creatine, and I use this as an example. Everyone's telling you, you've got to, everyone's taking creatine, right? You've got to be on this now if you're someone who works out or whatever. And you might go onto a Google search, and already you'll have the AI assistant recommending 3 products. And then you might go into like a YouTube video. You end up in this YouTube rabbit hole on the couch, right? Late at night. And then you're confused. You're like, which one of these products do I buy? And then you might scroll Reddit, and then you might see a TikTok from an influencer or a trainer that you trust. And then you forget. And then, you might walk into a store at the weekend, pick up a tub of creatine, read the label, and then put it back. And then we'll retarget you. And then you'll be like, okay, I'm going to ask my gym WhatsApp group, what creatine brand should I buy? They'll recommend, 3 people in the group recommend the same brand. Suddenly an AI assistant backs it up. You buy it in an app, right? It's like, that's 10 touch points to buy one product, pretty much mostly on platforms that we don't control as retailers, right? So a lot of the time when you're coming into one of our stores or you're visiting our website or our app, a lot of that decision's been made on these other platforms. And I think that's going to become increasingly interesting as well. So when you're someone like Google, you're thinking about, well, how much does YouTube now play into that purchase journey? And then it's quite interesting that I think you could go from the YouTube into potentially a chatbot or a journey that's then going to help you either learn more about it, search for the product, but then potentially take you all the way through to put it in my basket, pay for it, ship it to me. I think it's going to be a really interesting place to play.
Yeah.
And I think we're all going to have to figure out how to make those channels work.
Do you have any technology currently that helps you track? Because you're right, the journey is so fragmented. And I do this. I kind of have like a typical journey that I'll do. So for instance, grab your coffee, don't worry. I have a typical journey where it kind of works both ways. Either I'll find something that will be advertised to me, usually on Instagram, because that's the age that I am, and I use Instagram more than I use TikTok. I'm trying to get into TikTok, but I'll have found it through a social media, and then I'll go and verify it via going on ChatGPT. Is this a good product? Like, can you check the ingredients for me? Is it doing what it says it does? Because I'm about to buy it. Or sometimes I'll go the other way around and I'll go to Chat or Claude. I want a product for this. What's the best, highest quality? And then I'll go and check them out on Instagram. Again, like I say, I'm in lots of group chats, way too many on WhatsApp. I might go, hey, what are you all using, girls? If it's creatine, for instance, I'm in a Power Girls PT group chat. I'll ask the other girls what they're taking, what brands they recommend. We'll have conversations. In fact, creatine is clearly a big topic for today. So, but actually, Mariana even and I were doing this on the train this morning. She was like, I just started taking creatine. I was like, I'm taking creatine too. Like, creatine clearly is the vibe today. Oh, on that, what do you take creatine?
Yes.
Which one do you take?
My Protein, I think is the brand. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm taking...
I'm not like sponsored or anything.
No.
It's the one I tried. Yeah.
Maybe we should look to do that. I am actually taking 2. Which is not entirely true. Usually I take the Zuki because I travel so much with the podcast and everything and, just never at home. They do little sachets, which for me is a game changer. So I can if I'm away for a week, I can take a week's worth of sachets and it's just much easier when I'm on the go. So Zuki I love. But I've also just been taking Reformed, which is like the coffee that's got protein, collagen, and then they give you in your second month, they give you a free creatine pouch. So I've been taking that as well.
Oh, that's very cool.
I'm here for it. I mean, whether it's making any difference or not, who knows? But I'm into the hype.
Yeah,
I've been sold too.
I'm into the hype. But what's funny is I went really old school with my discovery journey into it because let's
talk about that because that is what we are supposed to be talking about.
But like I walked into my gym and there was a digital screen and it had that brand on the screen, and I guess I'd seen that brand, like we sell it, and I was like, okay, well, if they're advertising it in my gym, which is quite a well-known brand and a lot of people I trust in there that I think I was like, oh, well, maybe that's the one I will try. And then I went and bought it. But it's really interesting how it wasn't social. It wasn't, it's kind of like, it's weird how seeing it on a billboard suddenly makes it almost more trustworthy.
Yeah.
Weirdly, that's how the world's changing, right? Because you see so many things on Instagram or TikTok, you don't really know
which is good. Whereas having seen that, I was like, oh, that must be an established brand because they're advertising here on this platform. And they can afford to do that. And it's interesting how you kind of that intent was, and consideration was influenced by that. Brand still works. Yeah. Brand is important. I often talk
100%.
about how brand isn't as important because I'm all about human-led marketing, which I do believe is going to become even more important. I'm sure there's going to be lots of chats around that this week. But brand is still important. It still plays a part. I'm a big advocate of human first, people powered. Buying through influencers, creators, whether that's in B2B or B2C, but we're seeing a place for brand again because, like you say, you don't know there's so many hooky, dodgy brands on the social media apps. You don't know if it's good or not. So that's a really good evidence point for where brand actually works really hard. Anyway, what I was trying to say before we got into a whole world of talking about creatine is tracking those journeys. I know you can't track every WhatsApp conversation. You're not going to be able to track the full customer journey, but can you get close to using technologies to try and map where these people are coming to you from?
You can. I mean, we're doing a lot of work in that space now because we can see actually that we do lose that visibility. So, and especially with, I suppose we've touched on it, right? People are going straight to OpenAI or Claude to do their searches. We don't necessarily yet have that full visibility. So increasingly, I think, we're going to have to figure out how to track those things. I think it's helpful. Of course, partners like Google are going to be thinking about how they connect parts of the journey that they can control, like YouTube and, their AI assistant, and from Gemini, from Google search, I guess, all the way through to YouTube. You might get some signals from that. But I think it's a really interesting point that we need to get better at stitching that together. And again, it's kind of something I touched on earlier, which is in the talk, which I think as retailers, we've often mapped these journeys or designed them in a way that we just think, oh, well, this is the customer journey. The customer does X, And when we started to talk about omni-channel, we were like, okay, well, we'll add a box for the store, right? And they'll do this, and then they'll go online, and then they'll come into store. And the reality is, you think about the conversation we've just had about creatine. People are messy. People are distracted. People are not linear, right? You might buy it in a store this time, you might buy it from Instagram another time, you might buy it online. It really depends on the mission, the mood you're in, where you are, right? You travel a lot, so that decision might be different. And I think increasingly it's realizing that we can't map those journeys. So yes, what are those data points we can find and stitch together so that we know when they do land on our site, our app, our store, you know, how do we complement maybe parts of the journey they've already been on? I think that's what we need to start thinking about.
Yeah. Well, can I be cheeky? You know, I'm always going to ask the cheeky questions. So you talked about some potential partners like YouTube. What kind of things are you seeing coming within the product, or how are you, like, you know, are you going to, I don't know, start to include more of that kind of, I guess, you know, community? Is there more from like an influencer point of view? Like, what's next for, and it doesn't have to necessarily be about Boots, but what do you think's next for product? Because I do think, you know, I mean, Boots is a huge brand. You've worked for lots of huge legacy brands, Selfridges, Sainsbury's, like, you know, but the way that we shop is changing dramatically. So what does that mean for products like Boots? It doesn't have to be specific. You know, are there things that you're thinking, right, we need to start to do this, or, you know, and like you say, it's changing all the time, but like, are there specific things?
I mean, I think I say this I think this for most retailers, and again, it's my opinion, right? But I think we've got to get away from that thinking that a new channel replaces an old one.
Okay.
Because, you know, we were having, I guess, like 10 years ago, everybody was talking about how it was all mobile first and we were all going to stop using our desktop browsers, right? And that's not true. People still use their desktops. Maybe you go back 15 years and it was, oh, e-commerce is going to kill the store. And it's like, again, that's not happened, right? You need both. And I think it plays into that thing of like, what's the mission that you're on? The moment will dictate what channel you use. So when it comes to the newer ways of shopping, I guess, that are emerging, like agentic, you know, does having a chatbot that suddenly can do a lot more than just recommend products, but actually might take you all the way through the full journey, and you can say, hey, help me discover this. Do you sell this? Which brand should I buy? Put it in my basket, you know, sign me in, check me out, whatever we decide. I think that's likely going to be a journey that we're going to have to support, but I don't think it's going to remove all the other journeys that we need to support. And then, so I think for retailers, where it's difficult is we just keep stacking these channels. And in many ways, we have to be good at all of it. And we have to connect them all together so that a customer doesn't go, oh, when I used the chatbot, I couldn't apply my promotion, but when I go on the website, I can. You know, you will start to get into all those weird edge cases that we need to make sure we remove. So I think it's just going to be, it's not easy, because I think we have to continue to meet the customer where they are. And the reality is the customer's everywhere. So we've got to build all these experiences and make them work together.
How are you finding on that? I'm sort of going back with another question that's slightly different, but how are you finding in store now? Because my daughter is, you know, 17, nearly 18 next month. Wow. And she is a big fan of shopping in real life. She doesn't actually like shopping online. She doesn't. She wants to go and try things on. She will order, you know, she'll do like bulk orders and try a load of stuff on at home, but she really doesn't like doing that. She wants to go in the store. She wants to try it on. If it's a product, she wants to go, you know, into whichever, you know, beauty or, you know, makeup store it is, and she wants to try the products. Is that something in my head that feels like that potentially is a thing coming? Are you starting to see that at Boots, as in footfall? Or
I mean, the store business has always been strong for that brand, right? So I don't necessarily think, and that's my point, I don't think these channels they stack, they don't replace each other, because I think you're right. And you know, my daughter's a couple of years younger than yours, but similar. I think there's an interesting thing going on with that generation anyway, where like they seem to be almost, and again, this was something we maybe couldn't have predicted. In this world where we are so technology driven, it's really interesting to me that they're rebelling against that. Like, that's how they rebel. So, you know, my daughter recently, I found her mobile phone just left on the landing, and I went downstairs and said, you left your phone upstairs, you know, thinking, how are you surviving without your phone? And she was like, yeah, no, that's intentional because I'm having a break from it. And I was like, I nearly fell over. But there's almost this, like, you know, she refuses, I should stop like putting my kid on the spot here, but she doesn't love using AI. She refuses to use ChatGPT.
That's so interesting.
It's almost like there's this backlash against some of that tech. And maybe it's because they've grown up surrounded by it, right? And it's the same. It's to me, it's similar to like why are all these kids also like apparently, and I know it's probably a small number compared to if you go back much further, but apparently in the US, they've sold more vinyl last year than ever, like in 19 consecutive years in a row, vinyl sales have grown. That can't just be old people buying records, right? So again, that kind of, there's something about authenticity and kind of going back into the store, I think is part of that, because I see that a lot. So again, I think, is it that one's going to replace the other? No, we have to be good at all of it. I think the difference though is that generation, because they're so tech native, they will expect things to work in a way that maybe other generations have accepted. You know, we were the test bed for some of this stuff. And every once in a while, I mean, I'll go back to my work early on at Sky where, you know, you'd have customers ringing you up going, I don't understand why I can see the deal online, but you're not offering it to me on the phone, you know, and there was that complete disconnect. And you'd have these poor call center agents having to explain, yeah, that's because the technology is not the same. You know, customer doesn't care. They're like, well, you said I'd get £100 off. Where's my £100 off? I think where we accepted that because we learned through those bad experiences, I don't think that next generation is going to be like that. They're going to be like, if I see it on your app and it's advertised at this price, when I decide to go into store to buy it instead, I'm expecting to see the same price, the same deal, you know. So I think there'll be things like that potentially need to be slicker because they'll want to do both.
Yeah, authenticity, it wins. I think that's the thing. And that also in its own right is being authentic, isn't it? Having the same deals. I know we do like on app offers and things like that. But I'm so with you on that. My daughter's the same, by the way. She also hates ChatGPT. She laughs at me. She's like, Mum, you're not using chat again. Come on.
I get this.
She's like,
all the
it feels so dumb.
Yeah.
Like, can't you just think for yourself? And no, actually, I can't.
I've had exactly the same conversation with my
and
daughter.
She won't use it for her homework. She won't. The only thing she'll do is she's literally about to start her exams for A-levels, but she'll write her essay or exam paper or whatever it might be, and then she'll photograph it, she'll get it to market and listen to its advice, but she won't use it to write. She won't use it to edit. Yeah, and I think that, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? They don't want to be fake. I think they see so much fakeness with AI and technology. They want their lives to be more authentic. So that is going to be something to watch. And I do think, you know, both our daughters who live miles apart and, you know, have very different experiences, but in a similar sort of age group, I do think that is a trend. One last question, Fabrice, before I let you get back to the show. What is the future of product and UX? If there's one thing that people can take away from this conversation and what you spoke about on stage today, what should that be?
Well, I think for a long time in retail, you know, product and UX thinking probably, you know, wasn't developed for retail. It comes from companies where, you know, the product you're building is the business and it's very tech focused. And I think that's a slightly, you know, not simple, but it's less complex maybe than retail, where you've got all these different parts of the business that are all owning the customer together. No one really has one clear picture in retail, right? I mean, your marketing teams, your ops teams, your tech teams, everyone has a piece of the customer, and it's like, how do you bring it together? I think for too long we've seen product as just that delivery engine, like go and build me this, and they're kind of that interface between what the business wants and what we ask the technology teams to build. And I think by doing that, you're only getting half of the value out of your product team and your UX team, because what you have in product and UX is a lot of agnostic, independent thinking, because by the nature of it, you know, we work very closely with marketing, but we don't necessarily have the same numbers to drive. So we can look at it and maybe ask the questions that your marketing teams won't ask, like, is that still right? Does the customer still care about that? Should we think about another way to get to that outcome, right? And I think it's, again, in a world where we're going to need to experiment more to build the plan, go find the people in your organization that can help you stay close to the customer, agnostic, will challenge you, and potentially bring them in early so that when you do end up building something, you're building the right thing.
Love that. So important. Yeah. Keep it about the customer. Thank you so much, Fabrice. Enjoy the rest of the show. Who are you excited about seeing? That's who should I go see?
The scary and fun thing about coming to something like this is I know so many people now that, you know, just having been in retail for so long, that I'm seeing so many of my, like, people I'd consider friends now on stage. So I'm looking forward to catching up with all of them. I'm not going to name any because I'll forget someone and it'll be embarrassing.
It'll be me.
But loads of people I know, there's pictures of them all over the place. And yeah, it's great. It's a great place to be.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.